This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. This week, we speak to Graeme Hall, Executive Chairman of Brandon Medical. Graeme shares with us a great template for turning around a failing business, navigating selling into the NHS, the importance of company culture and values, and also gives a simple but really useful guide on how to start exporting. Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. That's all. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into what's a really educational and interesting episode. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, I'm delighted to have with me Graeme Hall, Executive Chairman of Brandon Medical. Good morning, Graeme. Actually, it's afternoon. Good afternoon, Graeme.
Yeah, hi, Phil. Pleased to be here.
Now, you were just discussing this. By trade, you're a chartered engineer, a manufacturing engineer. And you acquired Brandon in '93. So what's a chartered engineer doing buying businesses?
Well, I started my career in manufacturing engineering, manufacturing management. So I trained actually with a local company, Premier Farnell. Went off to university, did my degree, my master's degree, ended up at Ford Motor Company as a manufacturing engineer. And eventually went back to Farnell's, where I worked my way through the company to position of director of one of the subsidiaries.
Okay.
But there was a change of ownership. Change of management at Farnell's that didn't suit me. So I ended up leaving the business, looking for something else to do. And myself and my father decided that we'd look for a business that we were familiar with, which was electronics and mechanical engineering, somewhere in our locality that was in a niche area. And Brandon Medical was a business that we found that was in financial difficulties, about to go into administration, manufacturing, operating theatre lights for hospitals. So it ticked all of those boxes. It was based in a falling down old Victorian building in the middle of Hunslet that badly needed repair, with products that were all outdated, and a management team that was a father and son that had basically run out of steam a long time previous to it getting into bother.
What made you decide to go into the acquisition rather than just looking for another job when you left Premier?
Well, my father had been involved. He actually was CEO of Premier Farnell before the management change, and he'd bought 28 different companies in the group as it grew. And actually, in my experience, I've been involved in the onboarding and integration of 4 of those businesses into the group. So we actually had an experience between us of buying companies and actually resolving problems with those companies. So the initial plan was to buy a business using that experience and skill set, turn it round, and then find a new buyer for it, sell it on, and do it again. Didn't quite work out that way. We found a business that was far too interesting. Right.
And so I suppose the fact that it was on its knees and had lots of problems, I suppose that was the interesting side of it, rather than.
Yeah, we had a business that was like, I didn't mention, but I had an opportunity to join a business that was actually targeted failing businesses and rescuing them and turning around, who had a formula for buying bankrupt businesses. So we actually used their formula as part of that mix of deciding what we were going to do and how we were going to do it.
Okay. So without giving out any trade secrets, what's the basis of that formula if somebody else wanted to go and buy a distressed business?
Well, it was 2 wealthy gentlemen who basically what they did was they bought small businesses in niche areas, usually family run. Usually second, third generation, where there's a generation of people from the family who were running the business who wouldn't be the people you chose to run the business if you had a clean sheet of paper. So they weren't necessarily that had the right skill set. Sometimes didn't even want to be there. They just felt obliged to run the family business. Eventually, it's a well-known model, isn't it? That the third generations of businesses when actually family businesses quite often fail because that third generation never saw how hard it was to start the business, earn the money, don't understand how it worked, where the wealth came from, and didn't have the skill sets with the ideal people to run it. And I think it's very true. So if you're going to look for those types of businesses, it's a good place to look. It's quite often a business with a good product in a good niche with good staff, actually quite often good culture, but poor management.
So, and I know this was back in '93, so we're going back, what's that, 30, 35 years.
I was 30 years old then. Look at me now.
Long hair.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far.
People watching the video. Okay, so going back all that time, what was, you get the keys, you walk in day one. What do you have to do when you're turning a business round that's on its knees?
Well, at that particular the business, it was a case of trying to work out what your cash position is, what you've got available, what demands are on the business. So it had it didn't stop trading. So it had customers who were expecting delivery, it had a big backlog of orders. It had orders you couldn't deliver because they hadn't been paying suppliers. So basically, it was going through each of those problems from an immediate customer point of view. They're immediate and every problem that have to be resolved. Bearing in mind you're supplying hospitals as well. So it started off actually going through that stage, working out how to look after the cash, how to get paid. There was a big debt book that hadn't been collected. So collecting the debts, working out how to unjam the orders that were stuck, and then learning as much as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. And that means talking to absolutely everybody in the business. And not just the managers, basically all the workmen, the cleaners, everybody to work out what the hell's happening, what isn't happening, and how to make it all move again. Essentially, businesses, particularly manufacturing business, it's a bit like a sausage machine. If it stopped working, it's all parts of the machine that you've got to start working together again. And the bits that are jamming it up are the bits to remove so it starts to work. And as soon as you've started doing that, got the thing going, then it's working out, well, how do we improve it and make it better?
Right. Okay.
In the case of Brandon in particular, we borrowed money to actually buy the business. 10 weeks later, we actually repaid all that money. So the return for that risk was very quick and huge.
Right. So I think, sort of read between the lines, it was actually a half decent business, just really badly run, and just needed a new pair of eyes to sort through it.
I won't go that far. No, it was a terrible business, badly run. But it had been in the market a long place. So people, the customers recognised the name, so it had some brand recognition. Not always for the best things, but a lot of people did know who it was. It had a loyal workforce, and it had a decent enough product, but outdated at the end of its life that needed redesigning. So you asked me, why don't you start a business from scratch? If you start a business from scratch, you need premises, you need somebody to answer your telephones, you need somebody to do the books. So starting a business from scratch isn't this type of business isn't a one-man operation. You probably need a dozen people to start off a small manufacturing business. You probably need a finance person, an entrepreneurial person, a technical person to look after the products, an operations guy to look after the manufacturing. So that's 4 senior staff straight away before you've hired the receptionist.
Right.
So, if you're going to start a small business, actually, my advice is actually look for a small business to buy that's at least got somebody to answer the telephone. It's got a photocopier and some premises to work out of. All those things sound insignificant, but you have to have them all to start doing a business.
No, absolutely right. There is so much benefit from acquiring a business rather than starting up a business. But yeah, so once you, I mean, we're going to get up to date fairly soon. But once you'd sort of sorted out the basics, how did you then sort of press the accelerator to start building the business back up again?
Well, first step was hiring somebody to give me a hand. So I think we bought the business in June. My first colleague joined me end of September that year, who's still with us now and is our current technical director. So he was another engineer, but he was a technical man. We had a finance man. The finance man for the business had been brought in at the behest of the bank and actually was okay. Next step was to actually replace the sales director, who wasn't great. He was one of the family members with a sales director. That was about a year later. And then about a year after that, my brother joined us, he was a world management trainee with Unilever on the infamous Unilever training program, which they use to select their company and country managers and train them. So both he and I came from, unusual in a small company, that two of us came from blue chip companies with high level training and education into a small business. But basically, that was a core of our management team, and that team's still here. The sales director's been cycled. He was an elderly gentleman at the time, so he's since retired. But we've had a replacement for him. And then from there, with a decent management team, you then start to put the things in place that were missing. Quality management systems to actually create quality products. Redesigned our own products, so replaced those old products with ones we designed ourselves. And with those three things in place, management, decent quality products, systems to run the factory, that's when it started to accelerate.
Right. Okay. And just to clarify, it's medical supplies or medical theatre supplies, is that right?
We make equipment, medical equipment. So it's principally medical equipment for operating theatres and for intensive care units. Some of that equipment is then used in two other markets, which is primary care, that's family doctors, and into animal health. But those two subsectors just buy a subset of the products that we make, and it's a business that's always exported. So we vary between 50% and 30% exports.
Okay. You sort of preempted my next question. I suspect might be assumptive, might be wrong. Is the NHS your biggest client? And with that, what problems does that bring?
Well, people talk about the NHS. I think it's probably the NHS is an umbrella name for a group of organisations. It isn't, to the public it's one thing, but in reality it isn't. It's probably 32 different organisations. So at our level, we're selling usually to NHS trusts, so individual hospital trusts. Actually, a lot of what we sell is building new hospitals or big refurbishments where there's actually a major contractor in place. So we're selling a lot through construction. We do sell some things to NHS supply chain, which is a separate NHS body in its own right that buys goods for the NHS. But most of our goods is sold directly to hospitals and to the contractors building new hospitals or doing big refurbishments.
It always seems, and I do bits of angel investing, and we see a lot of med tech coming through, and they always seem to tell us that selling into NHS, whether it be NHS's umbrella, or supply chain, or trusts, is very long and very painful. Is that the case, or are you established as an established supplier and that's not as painful as it used to be?
No, I think the problem is it goes back to where I started from, really. The NHS isn't one thing. It's lots of different organisations under an umbrella. And even if you compare hospital trusts, they're independent organisations, so one trust doesn't do the same as another trust. And in a big trust, actually where we are in Leeds, it depends on how you're measuring size, but the Leeds Hospital Trust is either the second, third, or fourth biggest trust in the country, depending on whether you're measuring spend, size, staff. And even so, some of the size of that trust is done. Different parts of that trust do the same thing differently. I suppose the obvious thing being Jimmy's and LGI. So I've actually sat on the government think tanks on how to improve NHS procurement. And the thing about it is it's disjointed. It's lots of different. It's like a network of different purchasing methods and activities. And companies like ours have been here a long time. We spidered into that web. Our name's known because we've been there for such a long time. So we don't find it difficult. Actually, building up that level of knowledge is quite hard. Say it's hard. It takes either a lot of money or a long time. And some big organisations, big international healthcare companies have failed to crack the NHS because in many ways they assume it's one thing and it isn't. And it's the wrong approach. So, I think basically it's time, persistence, and actually emotional intelligence, talking to lots and lots of people and starting to understand the spider of how different types of procurement of your types of products work. And there's multiple entry points and multiple barriers.
Okay. I'll steer clear. I'll steer clear of medical equipment. It sounds far too complicated.
Well, the good thing about it is there's big barriers to entry. So as you build, as you build your way into the business, there's doors closing behind you to stop other people, taking your business away from you. So it's a good business, but it's not as straightforward as a business manual would make business appear to be.
Right. Okay. We've sort of gone off on a bit of a tangent there. Just talk me through some of the major step changes and markers on the journey from acquiring the business to where we are now. And I know that's a long period, but which are the bits that stand out, that the good bits and the bad bits? Because I think there's learnings in both.
Yeah, I think we started. I think the point where I finished the last question, we got to the point where we got new products, we got a management team, we've got a decent system in the factory for making it and quality. The next thing we did was actually rebrand the business, because it was known as an engineering business that made some medical products. So we rebranded as a healthcare business in 1999, and that was actually pretty good. Actually, it took us a big step up the supply chain from being a small engineering business that was just where you went when you actually needed some basic equipment, to actually being seen as a provider of medical products. At that point, the Medical Device Directive came into play, so there's a much higher degree of regulation of the products that we make, which are quite a lot of them are Class 1 medical devices. So that was a big step up, and actually the business grew rapidly then. And what we did was looked at what our customers were buying, as well as our products, and said, okay, well, we can make some of those things that they buy from other companies. So what we started to do was our marketing focus was on the areas where we work, but also looking at who our customers are and what they need. So we were focused on customer needs. So we progressively designed more and more for customer needs. From there, our next move was integration. So there's lots of different pieces of equipment in an operating theatre. So how do you make it all work together as an integrated system rather than individual pieces of equipment? And the next step of that was then actually smart. So actually turning that equipment into smart equipment, smart buildings, the buildings of the future, Internet of Things, AI, and that's where we are today. So each time, that's the brand profile of the business has been building, as we've been increasingly gone from being a product company to full service delivery and actually delivering above expectation. So we're delivering things that the hospital's not even thought of yet in terms of the things we can deliver through smart technologies.
Okay.
We've actually this 2 weeks ago relaunched the brand again. So I think our brand goes back 25 years. So we've now actually relaunched a much more modern looking brand that reflects actually the smart technologies that we're involved in now, rather than medical devices which we were making in 25 years ago, which were discrete devices.
Right. Okay. Tell me about the bits that didn't go as successfully.
Well, over the years, I think we've had a couple of false dawns with building export businesses. So we do have some international outposts now. So we've got a showroom and offices in Kuala Lumpur. We've got a trading company in Hyderabad in India, and we've got a regional manager set out in the Middle East. I think we underestimated how much resource each of those takes, and actually not just to build it up. It's the start of doing that's quite obvious in how to do it, but actually when you're trying to manage somebody who's in a time zone that's 9 hours away, is actually managing staff and actually building out our culture into the culture of our subsidiaries in a foreign country. We found it quite difficult. I suppose we've stepped forwards in Malaysia, in particularly with our offices there, but then we lost staff there who weren't living our value set, so they had to leave the business. So we have to start again. To us, actually, our value set underlies our brand. It's essentially my brother's my business partner. You mentioned him. I should have done it. He joined us. I think I did mention he joined us after 2 years. He's our current CEO. but actually we had very strong moral family values, not particularly not religious ones, but just ethical values about honesty, trust, delivery, what you promise, and our business is built on that. So that's what our brand means to us. And when we've hired people overseas who haven't lived those values, then that's unsustainable to us. So it's actually, we've learned that we've made steps forward where we assumed people had those values, but they really didn't. We didn't stay with it long enough to find out what was underneath. So having done that, we're starting afresh in certainly in our Asia Pacific office. Actually, we've done a lot better. In India, we do very, very well.
Okay. People talk about culture and values and the difficulty in sustaining it as businesses grow. How much of that difficulty is cultural in terms of foreign cultures and whether they fit with the culture and the values that you're talking about?
I think actually the values are fairly fundamental. People, if you look at the value sets of any company, you on the internet, they all say the same thing. They all say like we're good corporate citizens and everything. They all say the same thing. Not many companies really live their values. In a smaller business, we've got about just short of 100 people now. You can live your values, absolutely. And you start off when, we said we just rebranded, but the rebranding wasn't, we're designing a new picture of, the company name and a new badge. It's ground up. It's like, okay, so from the factory floor to, the sales guys to the service people, this is what we think our values are. What do you think they are? They actually weren't massively different from those that we set out in the 1990s because people lived the values. So generally it's about honesty, trust, believing in each other, delivering what you promise to your customers. We have a slightly different value set from others in that we also insist on friendliness. So that's to each other as people in the business, to our suppliers and to our customers. And that basically drives a different type of behaviour than normal. You don't have to be the best of friends with everybody you work with, but you have to at least be very good colleagues. And then once you build that value set, they're all human values. So if you take that to a different culture, they're slightly interpreted slightly differently, but it's fundamentally finding people who have those values and uncovering, taking the wrapper off the onion to find out what's inside is the thing that's the difficult thing and takes a little bit of time.
I'm just wondering. I've interviewed other people who've worked with family members. How does that dynamic work? And I mean, obviously, you've been doing it 30 years. It must be okay. But talk to me about working with family, because I think there's people listening who might think I couldn't work with my brother or sister or dad or mum or something like that.
It's actually works fabulously for us. I think we reckon that in 31, 32 years of working together, we had one thing we didn't agree on. And it wasn't a particular major thing, so we just tossed a coin and it came up heads or tails to decide. The thing that is good is intrinsic trust, and there's quite a lot of symbiosis. So we both know what the other, because we've been together, we've grown up together, we have the same family values, the same upbringing, we've worked together for so long. Whenever we're in a meeting or dealing with a business problem, you can almost tell what the other one's thinking. And actually, we're quite highly aligned, but we think in very, very different ways. So I'm more logical, he's more creative, and doesn't think, Adrian thinks of things that are off the wall, aren't on a straight sequence of strategy line, whereas I'm, much more textbook strategic about planning things. But the two things work brilliantly because you get the mixture of, the mad, the crazy, and the systematic, and picking out the two to do something different from what everybody else would normally do. You have to have that creativity somewhere in a business, otherwise it's just boring and you're static and you're open to going backwards. I think generally in a business, you've got to plan always to be moving forwards, because as soon as you decide that you're not going to move forwards anymore, intrinsically you'll go backwards as your competitors just take chunks out of you because they've seen what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked in my business with my wife, and I'm the ideas one. She's the sensible one. So I think it's interesting. We were the same. You've got that inherent underlying trust, but you're both coming at it. You've got the same aim, but you're both coming at it from different angles. And I think those two things work well.
We do have a pact not to work with each other's wives.
I won't go there. Now, I know, having had a look over the website, you've won lots and lots and lots of awards over the years. Which were the ones that sort of made you most proud and meant most to you?
We won the Rubon d'Honneur in the European Business Awards. It's going back a while now, but that was the year we entered. There was 10,000 businesses entered across Europe. So there was a national level which we won, and then you get entered into the European level, a bit like the Champions League, where we're competing with companies like Dell and Kellogg's. Actually, Morgan Cars were there from the UK as well. But out of that 10,000, there's only 100 prize winners, and we won one of those gold medals, which was fabulous. It was, it's by far the biggest competition we've ever been in. We've won 3 Queen's Awards as well, which are very special, particularly to British people. But that's that's within the UK. The European Business Awards was like stepping out and up another level internationally, which for a small business of 100 people is a big thing to do.
In my business, we won a number of awards, and people have differing views on the value and the benefit of awards. Is it just fluff, or does it actually make any difference? What's your view?
It was a strategic decision in 1999 that basically we rebranded from this old engineering business that wasn't very good into a new business that's now got new medical products as medical devices. And actually, some of it was quite clever. There was a lot of innovation, and it was okay. Well, if we get awards that recognise innovation and also exporting, those things impress our customers. Our customers value the innovation, the fact that you're an international business exporting products. They value that. So if you look at all of our awards, they're generally about exporting and innovation. More recently, there's some about people development, as well as the business has matured about developing particularly young people, and apprenticeship awards. And we were winning at one point 4 or 5 innovation awards a year. Our bigger competitors always used to, try to put us down by saying, "Oh, they're a small company. They're just a little company. They haven't got anything special." It gets quite hard for them to do that when you've won 20 innovation awards. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So for us, it was part of that branding and showing people that actually we're not just a small engineering business in the back end of Leeds anymore. We moved to a new factory at that point of time in Middleton, into a modern factory unit. We started to actually show ourselves as a growing medtech business with much better respect. And we've continued that path ever since.
Brilliant.
So in terms of awards, I don't think one makes much difference, but I think actually if you've got a history of doing it, also it starts, the staff start to actually buy into it as well. It's part of the culture. If we haven't won an innovation award for 2 years, Christ, we're not inventing enough. We've got to go and invent something new. What are we going to do?
No, that's really good, because if you're proactively doing this, it's part of the marketing, it's part of the business development, it's part of the staff motivation. I like that. I like that a lot. We're going to come up to date in 1 minute, but before we do, I need to speak to our listeners and viewers about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has 2 sides to it. My side to it is every week I bring you inspirational, motivational, and fascinating business owners like Graeme, totally free of charge. And you, listener and viewer, have 2 things to do as your part of the deal. Part number 1, recommend this podcast to one other person you feel will get benefit from it. And part number 2, post us a review on the Apple Podcasts app or at podchaser.com. That's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Sound like a fair deal, Graeme?
Sounds good to me.
There you go. Graeme says it's a fair deal. Right, now, let's get right up to date. Back end of last year, you sold the business. So talk us through that from, the point at where you go, let's sell, or we approached, and then just talk us through the process, because lots of people who are listening run their own businesses, and selling a business is a one-time thing. You only do it once. So talk us through the story of it, the process, the ups and downs, the pain points.
Yeah, I think for us, so the business belongs to myself and my brother. It's not an intergenerational business. Actually, our children are the oldest one's 20. So there's two things really. Is they there's a big gap between them and us, so there isn't a natural progression of those young people coming into the business. We've also done a lot of work, and still do a lot of work with German Mittelstand companies, which as people may know, that the companies, medium-sized companies, grow very successfully in Germany and pass from one generation to another. And some of those companies I know very, very well, know the families who own them. And to be honest, a lot of the people in the third generation didn't choose that as a career, and have got a huge weight of responsibility on their shoulders, some of which they're ill-equipped to deal with. So we didn't think it was fair to actually put that on our children's shoulders, to carry the burden of the business that your parents have spent their lives developing. In case if it goes wrong, that would be a terrible, terrible place for that young person to be in. With that in mind, we were always cognizant of the age of our management team. So you go through life thinking, okay, well, getting to the point of late 50s, and you're thinking, well, at some point, none of us are here forever. You have to look for who's going to look after the business next. And this business is like one of our children. We've grown it from nothing. We've looked after it. We've nurtured it. It's made us laugh. It's made us cry. It's very important to us. The people that we work with, our staff, are all very important to us. So thinking, well, who can do more with this business than we can? So it's a case of then starting to think, well, who might that be? And our first steps actually was to say, well, not all businesses are suitable to be bought by somebody. You've got to have a business that's actually built to actually be a separate business, separate from its owners, so that it can survive without them being there. So you need to build a management team. So that's the first thing we did. We sort of build a business that's, if you like, a standalone business that actually, if I wasn't here or Adrian wasn't here, could still be run by a new owner. So having created that, then you start looking for a good custodian and a good place for somebody who can expand the business. So we spent a lot of time looking at, mainly what we did was built a beautiful business, a business that we think is really good. We did go to market and actually kissed a lot of frogs, and actually didn't find a prince. So we continued building the business, and then last year, out of the blue, it's like buses. 4 people came along, all out of the blue, thinking that's like a really good business you chaps have got there. We'd like to buy it. One of which actually has potential to actually increase the size of this business dramatically. So we put together a business plan with them that basically plans to increase the size of our factory manufacturing in Leeds threefold in 3 years. So it's a company that's got much better access to international markets than we have, much wider reach. So it's got a big distribution network that we can manufacture goods and put into that distribution network. So for us, it's a no-brainer. It's a business that is insistent on investing in the building, placing a long-term lease for 20 years on the building, showing intent that they've got to be here, putting investment in the business in terms of machinery and R&D, and giving us access to international markets that we're not in, and we'd like to expand into. So it's a long answer to a short question, but it's fairly systematic. It's like, what are you going to do with the business? Are you going to pass it through the family? If you're not, then you need to find somebody else you're going to pass it to. You've got to make it, condition it so that actually it's a standalone business that's capable of being run by somebody else. And then you've got to start looking around for people who might want to buy it, who usually aren't competitors. People seem to think, a lot that there's like consolidation is competitor buys competitor, but they don't. If you buy a competitor, you destroy a lot of value because there's a lot of duplication. So each time, if somebody makes the same product as you do and you buy them, then you've got 2 designs that have been lots of money invested in them, and one of them you're going to put in the bin. So actually, it's usually complementary products or complementary markets or complementary sales channels that are attractive. It's not usually a direct competitor.
Okay, there's a few things I want to dig into there. So you said you did the whole beauty parade thing, which obviously is the usual route people go down. Just let's just dig into that a little bit. How did you do that? Did you go to a sales agent? Did you go to a corporate finance company? And then what was that process like?
We went to one of the big four, which was for reasons of international reach, which they all declared that they've got, and actually I don't think they really have. The I think in retrospect, we that was a false path to go down. We'd have been much better off using people who specialise in smaller businesses and actually looking for that international reach ourselves. Essentially, it's probably not the same for all businesses. We're in a fairly obvious niche, and actually within such a niche, and the international nature of the business, we've got probably a better handle on who might be interested in owning the business than anybody else. There are things that come out of left field, but actually, we're probably as equally good at finding them as anybody else.
Okay, that's interesting. Because when we sold our business, we were in the same situation, very small niche. It's just as easy for me or you to pick up the phone and ring people and say, "Look, we're for sale. Are you interested?" than spending, I'm guessing, quite a lot of money with a big four company who are probably shooting more blind than you would be if you'd done it yourself.
Yeah, I mean they've got a process, and even when they approach big international companies, they basically their approach is to go to the where XYZ. I won't say which of the big four it is. They go to the M&A department of a big company, and they're going, well, why would we want to buy such a small company? And that doesn't mean to say that company wouldn't be interested. They would be, but they're the wrong people. You need to be at the departmental or subsidiary level that's actually ties in and actually could make money out of your business and can make it grow, which usually, if you're a small business, if you go into the biggest healthcare company in the world's M&A team, they'll never have heard of you and it'll be too low to be on their radar. But it doesn't mean to say that you haven't got something that strategically could impact them, but they won't see it. You've got to find the technical manager, the business unit manager who knows and says, God, you've got a brilliant product. We could make $100 million out of that.
Very, very interesting learning that. I mean, it's basic sales, isn't it? It's selling to the person who's interested in buying and somewhere that they can move their needle. It's not going to move the needle at PLC level, but it might move the needle at departmental level or subsidiary level.
Well, I think actually we had things that could move the needle at PLC level, but actually needed the business expertise to actually see that opportunity.
Right.
Which isn't in an M&A team. They've got M&A expertise. All they're looking at is numbers.
Yeah. So having not found anybody through that process, you said 4 people just out of the blue, just in effect contacted you and said, we're interested. So you had your own sort of private beauty parade at that point.
Yeah, to be fair, 3 of them were out of the blue. One was actually somebody re-approached us from that first exercise, which was a PE business.
Okay.
So, but the others were trade.
Right. Okay. And at that point, you then said, right, we want to go with, we'll look more in depth into the people who actually bought it in the end.
Well, actually, I think you always, if you want to sell a business, you always want to run at least 2 cats. You basically, it's a large number of transactions don't run to completion, so you always want to have options and keep them open as long as you can.
Right, and you did that.
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah. My new friends might be listening.
All right. I'll stop digging now. Okay. Without going to specifics, there are 2 sides to a business. One is the price, and one is the structure of the sale. How you'd have to give me numbers. How's the sale actually been structured?
It was a sale and buyback. So it was obviously we had a budget last year that was terrified most business people. So we had a 100% sale before the budget, and then we bought back shares. So we crystallised our capital gains in the old regime, and then reinvested in a new holding company. So there's the new owners own 70%, and the other 30% belongs to me and my brother and some of the other directors of a minority share.
And how was that 70% structured? Is that all on day one, earn out over a number of years?
It's typically structured with a lump sum and then a couple of deferred payments. I wouldn't call them earn outs; they're deferred payments. They do have some relationship to performance, but they're predominantly deferred.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Right. Every week on the Leeds Business Podcast, we ask our guests to share their expertise with a how-to. So, Graeme, tell us what your how-to is going to be and teach us how to do it.
Okay, well, I was looking at some of the other subjects that you've covered in the past, so I thought I'd try to choose a different one.
Yep.
So, a lot of people ask Brandon about exporting. We've exported since I first came to Brandon in 1993, which is very new to me as a manufacturing engineer. Running a business was new, let alone exporting. And about 6 months into the business, I realised, well, actually, I'm going to have to do something about this, because if you don't look after your exporting customers, they'll disappear. So I just basically threw myself into it. People say, well, how do you get started in exporting? And I think actually myself and my brother both say the same thing, which is like JFDI. Well, I don't know what the F stands for, but just do it.
Yep.
Basically, it's like most things. You have to start somewhere. So the first thing to do is to say, well, have I got a product or a service that somebody overseas can buy from me? So, for example, I can sell a product that we make here that goes in a box. So I can ship it overseas. Something that doesn't need, a maintenance team and a service team behind it. Well, that product you can sell. If it needs trained servicing and installation engineers, that's a different proposition. Not impossible, but you've got to find somebody who can service it and install it. If it's something that's predominantly a consultancy service and requires people to be travelling overseas, well, depends. For a manufacturing business, that becomes quite difficult. If you're a consultancy, maybe you can. So basically, you've got to look at your product and think, is that something I can actually sell and support in another country? If you can't, you haven't got an export business. Once you've got something, so obviously Brandon Medical has some physical products. It does require some installation and service and support. So if I've got this exportable service, the next thing I've got to start to do is to work out, who might buy it? Which country should I go out? The world's a big place. At the first level, I don't think it matters that much. Maybe for medical products, most countries will buy, has got some form of hospital, so we'll buy some of our products. So we looked at different places, and once you actually identify countries who buy it, you start picking out the ones that you like or don't like. We crossed off the countries where our biggest competitors were based. They're pretty much stitched up their own market, so that's wouldn't be the easiest place for us to go first. So we go to countries that haven't got a domestic manufacturers of what we make. Not always the biggest ones. The biggest ones can be quite difficult, but actually, if you go to a small country, it's quite easy to start learning the culture. I don't know, if you pick example close to home. If you decide you're going to export to Wales, well, if you go to Swansea and Cardiff and start working from there, you've probably actually got a good idea and you've probably covered most of it, because it's a small area and it's a small market and it's got a nice defined place to start going. We started in Thailand, bigger than Wales, but actually I think 60% of the population live in Bangkok. They're all in one place. So actually, culturally and business-wise, everything's in that one city. So we chose some markets where we thought we had an opportunity, where there wasn't a domestic competition. I'd look at what our competitors do. You can do that. These days, it's a lot easier. When we started, there was, we didn't have the internet to rely on. But you can go incognito, you can pretend you're in Thailand and actually look at who's the local distributors of your competitors' products. So you start to get a picture of who's selling those products, what types of companies they are. You can go on their website, have a good look at them, and you can build a picture. At the end of the day, we're all experts in our own product and service, the thing that we do. It's actually almost obvious to you as a business person when you actually see this information coalescing, whether you've got an opportunity or not. And then when you actually, if you pick half a dozen markets to do this on, you pick the ones where you think, well, I'm going to put a finger in the air and say, I think it's that one and that one that give me the opportunities. So I haven't spent a lot of money so far. I've just spent a bit of time on a Sunday afternoon doing research on the internet mainly. Once I've actually picked my targets, then I'm going to work out a bit more before I spend any money on it. So Google's your friend. You got to look deeper and deeper. Look for if we sell to hospitals, the end user selling to hospitals. Why are the hospitals Where do I think the hospitals buy stuff from? Can I see any medical distributors there? There are other places you could ask for help, like the Department of Business and Trade has regional trade advisors that will help you. They also recruit export champions from companies who export, of which we are one, who will actually provide you with some help and advice. There are trade associations, so we're members of Medilink, and so there's other companies doing the similar things to us. So going to their events, meeting other people in your industry who are exporting, talking to them. A lot of it is about talking and basically just collecting every little bit of information you can. So if you read the trade manuals, they go through like defined things like a business thing. Actually, it's not so much about that. It's but learning every little bit as you would in your home market about all the different things that are happening around people who buy and sell your products. Competitors are a great source of information, looking at what they're doing. And the Chamber of Commerce as well can provide advice. But once you've collected that, you've got started to get a picture. The thing you then got to do is get on an aeroplane or ferry and go and visit. So go and have a look at the market, walk around the customers, see what products they're using, and go and ask them where they bought them from. Where they're getting the products from. For us, we looked a lot at complementary products. So people who are selling a product that actually is used by our customers that's not a competitor to us. If you find out who their distributor is, then he's actually got a need for our products as well because his customers buying them. I think intrinsically the problem with exporting that people see is starting to export is they don't know where to start. So it comes back to the thing is, well, it's actually not that difficult. It's about just getting a foothold and building, just as you would in any market. If you try to launch a new product in the UK, I don't think, or we've never found individual cultures in countries any kind of problem at all. We did used to go on the DBT training. So you basically go and do cultural training before you set off in a country. And we stopped bothering to do it because it was much more beneficial to talk to people and ask them about the culture and learn from the actual people that you want to work with, because it shows interest and investment of you in them and it builds relationships. And that's a lot better than going to a government presentation on what's a culture in China. If you actually go with the intent that you want to learn and you want to do business and you want to build relationships, it's very hard to offend anybody. If you do something that's out of place, people will tell you and you laugh about it and you move on and don't do it again. So in short answer to exporting is JFDI.
JFDI.
Yep.
Yep. I love it because JFDI is one of my favourite phrases. But that is just so much good old-fashioned Yorkshire common sense, all of that, isn't it? And it's great because exporting does, to somebody who's never exported, looks and sounds really, really scary. But actually, when you break it down like that, it's just like opening any other market, isn't it?
It is, and to be honest, it's like one of the most enjoyable things you can do. It's like I travel these days on holiday to places I've worked in for years, and I actually realised I actually had more fun doing the exporting because you're learning so much more culturally than going to see another bloody temple. It was great fun, and I've built up some fabulous friends and relationships with people around the world who are just lovely people and really, really interesting.
Yeah. Great stuff. Okay, before we finish, every guest gets the opportunity to give another company a shout out to. So, Graeme, who are you going to give a shout out to?
Well, I've got we were founder members of Medilink, which I mentioned earlier, which started I think in 1994. And it's Medilink's a triumvirate of universities interested in medical and health and life sciences, NHS trusts, and the medical device companies that make the stuff that they use and want to develop. So it does things. It's involved in promoting exports, in product development, in helping people with regulation. It's a small business in its own right, based in our regions, based in Sheffield, and it's got a membership of about 250 medical businesses, lots of whom are small and startups, and unlike most trade bodies, it's not really a trade body. It's an organisation to support SMEs to develop products, markets, and exports. In conjunction with people from the universities as well, and with customers in the hospitals. It's a fabulous organisation. Started there as a member in it in 1994. I'm actually, I have to declare, I'm a non-exec director of Yorkshire, north of England. But it's been a brilliant experience, and anybody who's interested in healthcare, whether it's developing products, moving into the market for the first time, I thoroughly recommend getting involved with Medilink. It's a very low-cost entry to get into the market and to get help.
Great stuff. And there will be a link in the show notes to Medilink, as well as connecting with Graeme on LinkedIn as well. Graeme, thank you very much indeed. That's been absolutely fascinating.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Enjoyed it a lot.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the follow button so every new episode gets sent straight to your phone.